Imagine winter arriving. The first snow falls without warning. Not the winter you know. No heating of any kind. Only a small fire holds back the freezing air. No stored food from a supermarket. No walls thick enough to stop the wind. Cold air finds every gap in the shelter. Just you, your group, and a cold that could kill within hours if you made the wrong choice. One wrong decision could end everything in hours. This was the reality for hundreds of thousands of years of human history. Generation after generation faced the exact same brutal season. And the methods ancient humans used to survive it were not gentle. They were desperate, brutal, and sometimes deeply disturbing. The weight of impossible decisions sat on every face. If you think you could survive an Ice Age winter, drop a comment and subscribe right now, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how thin the line between life and death really was. The first dark reality of ancient winter was starvation planning, not accidental hunger. This was planned hunger. Ancient humans living through harsh winters knew, months in advance, that food would run out before spring. The countdown to scarcity began long before the cold arrived. And they made a calculation that modern people rarely have to face. Who eats, and how much, and in what order? Researchers studying skeletal remains from Ice Age populations have found something disturbing. Clear evidence of seasonal malnutrition, bones that show periods of severe nutritional stress, followed by recovery, repeating year after year. The pattern was undeniable and precisely documented. This was not occasional famine. This was the normal winter cycle. The body slowing down, growth stopping in children during the coldest months. Fat reserves burned down to almost nothing by the time the first spring plants appeared. Relief arrived just as reserves reached their absolute limit. Every single year, survivable, but only barely. And the margin for error was almost non-existent. The second dark reality was who got fed first. In many studied hunter, gatherer, and early agricultural societies facing food scarcity, the distribution of what little food remained was not equal. One portion was always visibly larger than another. The most productive members of the group, the skilled hunters specifically, those capable of finding more food, those most likely to survive and continue contributing. They received priority access. This meant that in the worst winters, the group's calculation was not sentimental. It was mathematical. Who has the highest chance of helping the group survive to spring? Feed them first. The alternative, in the most extreme cases documented by anthropologists studying historical famine periods, was that the group itself would not survive at all. An empty, abandoned camp was the silent consequence of failure. Difficult decisions about food distribution were, in the coldest calculation, decisions about which parts of the group had the best chance of continuing. The third dark reality involves infants. This is difficult to discuss, but it is historically documented, and avoiding it would be dishonest. Researchers studying skeletal remains and ethnographic records from extreme resource environments have found evidence, in some populations facing severe famine, of infanticide as a response to unsustainable resource pressure. The evidence was tied directly to famine conditions, not to ordinary circumstances. This was not common in most groups, most of the time. But in the most extreme winters, when the choice was between the survival of the entire group and the survival of a newborn that the group could not feed, some populations made a choice that modern people find almost impossible to comprehend. The choice was agonizing, never casual. Anthropologists studying this pattern across multiple documented cultures found that it correlated specifically with resource scarcity, not with cruelty or indifference. Grief was shared and real, not detached. This is one of the darkest realities of ancient winter survival. And it reflects not the absence of love, but the presence of a mathematics of survival that most modern humans will never have to face. The fourth, dark reality, was what ancient humans ate when normal food ran out. Bone marrow extracted from the bones of animals killed weeks earlier, sometimes months earlier, was consumed as a last resort. The fat content, even in old marrow, provided calories that could mean the difference between survival and death. Boiled leather from clothing. Boiled leather from clothing and tools was consumed in extreme famine conditions, documented across multiple ancient and historical populations. It provided almost no nutrition, but it filled the stomach and reduced the physical sensation of starvation enough to allow continued function. The inner bark of trees. The inner bark of certain trees, ground down and mixed with whatever other food was available, was documented as a starvation food across numerous ancient and pre-modern societies facing winter scarcity. And in the most extreme and rare documented cases, archaeological evidence at a small number of sites has shown signs interpreted by researchers as consistent with cannibalism during severe famine conditions. This remains one of the most debated and carefully studied areas of prehistoric archaeology, and researchers are careful to distinguish between ritual practices, isolated survival cannibalism during extreme starvation, and other explanations for the physical evidence found. The scholarly process was careful, never sensational. What is not debated is that ancient winters, at their worst, pushed human groups to the absolute edge of what the human body and human choice could endure. The fifth dark reality was the treatment of the sick and injured during winter migration. When a group needed to move to find food or better shelter, and a member was too sick or injured to travel, the group faced a choice that had no good option. Slow the entire group's movement, risking everyone's survival for one person's chance, or leave that person behind with whatever resources could be spared and continue. Anthropological studies of documented nomadic groups facing exactly this scenario found that the decision varied by circumstance, by the severity of the situation, and by the specific relationships involved. There was no universal rule, but the choice itself, the fact that it had to be made, was a permanent feature of life in environments where winter made every day's travel a matter of survival. Now here is what almost nobody considers when they romanticize prehistoric life. Every single one of these dark realities existed because the alternative was worse. The starvation planning existed because unplanned starvation killed everyone instead of some. The prioritized feeding existed because equal distribution of insufficient food meant nobody had enough to function. The unbearable decisions about infants existed in populations where the alternative was believed to be the death of the entire group, including that infant's siblings. The consumption of leather and bark and old marrow existed because the alternative was faster death. The decisions about the sick during migration existed because movement itself was often the only path to any food at all. None of this was cruelty for its own sake. It was mathematics performed by people who loved their children, who cared for their elders, who wanted every member of their group to survive, and who were facing a version of arithmetic that modern humans, protected by supply chains and heating systems and modern medicine, will almost never have to perform. The winters that ancient humans survived were not survived because ancient humans were harder or colder or less human than we are. They were survived because ancient humans made impossible choices over and over for hundreds of thousands of years. And enough of those choices worked to produce every single person alive today. The chain of survival stretched unbroken toward the present. You exist because someone, in a winter you will never have to imagine, made a choice that kept enough of the group alive to eventually produce you. Drop a comment and tell me which of these 5 realities affected you the most. And subscribe because next time we go even deeper into the dark side of prehistoric life.